Welcome to the Underhand Free Throw. It's a basketball podcast with Ian and Simon. I'm Ian.
And I'm Simon.
And it's award banquets night over here. It's getting really glitzy and glamorous. Simon and I are both wearing really elegant dresses, and people are asking us lots of questions about them, and it's a big deal. Is the NBA still doing the award banquet thing? That's still a thing, right?
Wasn't that postseason? Like it's after the
Yeah.
the playoffs are over. It's kind of when people have stopped thinking about the NBA season, and if you are thinking about basketball at all, you're probably more thinking about the draft than what happened over the last 8 months, which was always just really odd timing to me. But there's not really much breathing room in between the end of the season and when the playoffs kick off. So I don't know when else they would do it either.
I think it was just an extra opportunity for them to get some attention, and since it was a new sort of thing, they're like, yeah, we get NBA stars like exhibiting their fashion. I don't know. Have you ever watched it? Like, it's never been a thing. I think of great excitement for diehard NBA fans besides just sort of the media spectacle. But I'm down for the media spectacle. I don't. Maybe I should be more into the awards banquet.
Last time I saw it, I think, was when James Harden was making a big deal out of winning the Players MVP, or was that Russell Westbrook making a big deal out of winning the Players vote for James Harden's MVP? I mean, it was one of them. I don't remember the order exactly. I remember those two guys were involved. One of them won the real award. One of them won like the Players' Choice vote, and yeah, that was several years ago at this point.
Hey, we're here for the drama, right? So that event is an opportunity for that. Even we're going to be a little bit less drama oriented, though. I do think sometimes when people are making arguments for players to make the All NBA team or to win any of these awards, it does sometimes feel a little bit more like a who's the most interesting player of the year, or like who was the players that captured our hearts, minds, and imaginations the most in the year 2023. Where obviously a lot of other people try to approach it as pragmatically as possible and make it all about a basketball impact. Do you have a way you like to define your criteria?
Well, I like to do kind of a mix of both. Yeah, I definitely lean more like overall two-way impact, I would say, is kind of my tendency, but I do take team record into account, even if a guy doesn't like have the most off the page, like on off splits or anything.
Yeah.
And then in terms of, I will say the one thing that I absolutely love, the new CBA announcement was just made a few days ago during this past week. And one of the most wonderful things I think in that entire agreement is we now have a games requirement for these all NBA teams, because I know both me and you have been getting really sick of these arguments where people are trying to quantify like how many games does a player have to miss before we got to start holding it against them, and getting into these discussions where it's like 58 games no penalty, 53 games played huge penalty towards all NBA. I was just sick of it, honestly. But the NBA has come up, or I guess collectively what the players union has agreed upon, 65 games being the cutoff. And that is actually, I know I'm a year in advance here, but that is actually how I formed my NBA teams. I cut some guys off the teams that are not going to hit that 65 game requirement. Maybe it's a little premature because I know that's not how the voting works this year, but I have just been desperately hoping for just some number to just be, this is how many games you got to play to make an all NBA team. And now we have that number. So I was just excited to get started.
So you're going to be cutting a lot of players tonight.
Yes. No, this doesn't.
I got a big list of cuts myself, but I think
as a Blazers fan, I wouldn't say this games requirement, if it's my personal interest, but I'm trying to be fair and objective here. I just want a number. I don't care what the number is. It could have been 41 games.
Well, I was trying to figure this out.
If the NBA was like play half the season and you can make an all NBA team, I'm cool with that. It just, I just wanted to know.
I was trying to decide on a criteria, and I think it might have been just like 1 or 2 days before they came out with the big CBA announcement announcing that 65 games as a requirement. I have heard mixed reviews on how flexible that's going to be, but I guess we'll see when it actually kicks in. I was more looking, both at past years and also the players that were eligible this year, and I settled in actually on 2,000 minutes. Like 2,000 minutes provided a pretty clear where if you were over 2,000 minutes, like there were still some, slightly questionable players on that list, but 2,000 minutes is a healthy number at least. Whereas like the players that were clearly not in or not touching 2,000 minutes, there's a couple players we'll get into that kind of are going to finish the season right on the line or just a little bit under or over, and maybe then it gets tricky. I think 65 is, I mean, like, we'll talk about the players this year, but there's a lot of guys who aren't going to hit 65, like, including some MVP candidates, maybe, depending on how the last couple games unfold.
Yeah, I mean, if it was close, if it's like they've played 62 and their team has 4 games left, they might end up resting 2 games and only playing 64. But the fact that they're close enough, like, I'm not going to be super rigid. It's more like guys who have played 56 games and they have 3 games left,
Yeah.
Those are more the guys I'm leaving off.
Yeah. You want to start with what position you want to start with? Let's save the centers for later, because that's maybe the best way to transition into.
Oh, you want to do like all the guards for all 3 teams?
Oh, the guard. Yeah.
We could do it that way.
Yeah. What format did you have in mind? I kind of had grouped things into forwards, guards, and centers rather than, because it's easier to compare players who are competing for those positions grouped that way. If we're just talking about first, second, and third, it's only a couple players who are competing for those spots.
Right. No, I like that. I was initially just going to say, like, let's read off our whole first team, then second team. But yeah, we can do guards. That way there's more debate over, you had this guy second team, I had him third, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's start off then, if we're talking about guards, because I think, like, there's like a minimum of 10 all-NBA guards for 6 spots this year, as well as like a lot of people I consider locks. I'm going to spoiler alert, there's really only 1 spot available on my guard list with much debate in my mind. But I'll start with injury cut, so players that I'm not eligible in my criteria are Devin Booker, Desmond Bane, and Tyrese Halliburton. And then Ja is probably going to clear 2,000 minutes, but it's going to be borderline.
It's going to be close.
Yeah. So I wasn't quite sure what to do with Ja, but when they're right on the line, it's like I'm totally fine with them being debated for one of those spots. And there's like some statistical arguments to make that Ja deserves one of those spots. There's also sort of, on the sort of like personal and narrative side of things, obviously this is not a great season for Ja, and sometimes people get punished for stuff like that overly, and it feels silly later when that player goes on to have a great career. Like, I don't know, like this, like when LeBron didn't win MVP because everyone just hated him, or like same with like James Harden didn't make an All-NBA team back that year that Houston was just sort of disappointing, but he missed out for like Klay Thompson, Kyle Lowry, and a lot of people made the team over him, and it kind of looks a little bit suspicious looking back on it now, but I'm not sure. There's a lot of good guards this year, so I don't know if we have that problem with Ja.
Yeah, I'll say it's a little bit easier for me because the 65 game limit versus the 2,000 game limit that both Steph Curry and Damian Lillard, who previously were going to make one of my All-NBA teams before this announcement came out, got summarily dismissed from All-NBA.
Hey, but this is the last year the Blazers can shut down Dame Lillard and still have him make an All-NBA team. And you don't want to take advantage of this opportunity on your own podcast? I say that's very noble, Simon.
If he didn't have the Supermax locked up already, maybe I'd have different feelings about it. But the man's made his money. So it's the only thing he's really missing out on here is whatever legacy points another, second or third team All-NBA gets you.
Yeah. Well, I thought about Lillard because not just because of the games played thing, but also because obviously the lack of success of the Blazers this year, and then the way he was shut down like that, is it leaves. I mean, I agree with the Blazers shutting him down. I think it makes sense, but it kind of leaves a sort of like, well, what was the point of the season? But then when I would run some statistical comparisons between players, and it's like, okay, but Dame's also off the charts, like. He doesn't when you group him with a bunch of people and look at all their numbers, it's like hard to put Lillard under too many people. So I do have Lillard on my WNBA teams. All NBA teams. Yeah, I'm getting ready for the WNBA season. I got my Aja Wilson T-shirt on. I'm ready. March Madness has me hyped for this WNBA season. Anyways, the All NBA teams. Lillard is making one of those on my fake ballot.
I mean, I think that's fair. The impact is incredible, and you do see people discounting Lillard because it's like, man, you can't lead a team to even like the 10th seed in the West. But then you take a look at the Blazers roster and you realize, man, there are some major holes here that are not present on almost any other NBA team. I mean, we're basically rivaling a Dallas Mavericks supporting cast, but with no Kyrie. Yeah, I was going to say, we have one of the worst rim protectors as a starting center and no backup. That's a pretty major issue. And the team without Lillard
no love
on the
for
floor,
Drew Eubanks ever on this podcast. No love for Drew.
The team without Lillard on the floor barely even looks like an NBA team, And with him, they're an 11 seed in the Western Conference. Like, not quite in the playoff picture, but at least competitive for that spot.
Yeah, and they were competitive for big chunks of the year. Things fell apart for them a few times, and they weren't built to really take any kind of injuries in the rotation and stuff. And yeah, like I've said a few times on this podcast, I think the biggest problem, it's not so much that they have one of the weaker rim protectors in the NBA, because I think there's a bunch of teams that have weak rim protectors, is that the Blazers are built and schemed specifically to depend on that rim protector, and that's when you notice it more. It's not like they're using a scheme to use Nurkic in different ways. And Nurkic still had some moments this season where he looked like his old self, but on the big picture, it was pretty bad for Yusuf. Yeah, it's. I mean, we can't no more. We've torn up Nurk too much on this podcast. So let's go into that. Let's get some locks out of the way. So and not even all these locks I feel great about, because all year I was sort of like Luka and Shai, and at different points, Shea, and at certain points Curry were obvious locks for me, and but. Now the Mavericks have had this implosion, but I still have Luka Doncic on my first team, and I have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on my first team.
Yeah, no disagreement there. Those two guys were 2 out of my 3 locks for all NBA spots. It was just a matter of who was going on what team. But yeah, I had I think it actually is Shai, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Shai.
There was something that, or no, it's not Shai.
Everyone says Shai. I always said Shai until
there was something where he confirmed one of the pronunciations of his name, where a lot of people were surprised by it. I can't remember if it was Shea or Shai, though.
Well, we're either doing it right or doing it wrong, but we're not going to correct it either way tonight. So hopefully it's Shai. I said Shai for a long time, but I had a coworker for a long time with the same spelling, so I just see Shai when I look at it. But I've heard Shai more. I don't know why someone would make up Shai if it wasn't Shai. Spelled with that I at the end.
It could be an Americanization of the name. Who knows?
Yeah, Canadianification.
But yeah, SGA. I'll just say that was definitely a lock for first team. And then Luka, with the team success and with his defensive fall off that he's had this season, I briefly considered bumping him down to the second team. But overall, the stats and the impact are too overwhelming, even despite the Mavericks' relative disappointment this year.
Yeah, I will say those two guards, compared to almost everyone else on this list, they do it a little bit different in terms of the way they can dominate the game inside the paint, and the lack of reliance on the three-point shot is pretty special. Like, we're talking about 2 of the premier kind of like Shai's just become one of the premier rim pressure players in the league, regardless of position. Like, he's really slicing defenses up and putting pressure on the rim, which is rare for a guard, and as exciting as they sort of grow as a team to see how that skill is going to scale up. Like, he did that all without really any shooting around him this year. So yeah, super exciting season for Shai, for the Thunder. And I think he's almost the cleanest lock, just in terms of how his team performed relative to expectations versus Luka, sort of thing, where I don't have any doubts about putting Shai in the team. Luka at least gave me some pause with how difficult the Mavericks season has gone once they decided they didn't need defense anymore, that they were willing to stop playing defense for the rest of the season just for a smell of Kyrie Irving. I didn't put Kyrie on my list really for kind of last cut considerations for this. I got 10 guards on this list, and Kyrie, I don't know, did I just forget him, or he probably deserves to be on this list. He's had a impressive offensive season by the numbers. It just felt like, I don't know, part of like pretty frustrating times for 2 different franchises. Like, Kyrie is, so I saw someone call it like, signing Kyrie or trading for Kyrie is making a wish on a monkey's paw, and I'm just like, That's
pretty much.
That feels apt. All right, so who's your other lock?
My other lock, believe it or not, well, do we want to get into our second team guards? Because I can discuss him at that point.
Yeah, we're gonna have to. There's nothing left to say about that
Okay.
first team.
My other lock is, you talked me into it, Donovan Mitchell. I did have him second team. He definitely became a lock after I considered the 65 games. I had Curry as a lock too prior to that. But yeah, I have Donovan Mitchell and I have Drew Holiday on my second team for guards.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, so Donovan Mitchell. Yeah, I mean, I remember you saying like, what really separates Donovan Mitchell from the pack, and you pushed me a little bit on it too as well, because I was like, well, what is special about him? And but basically, out of all this group of guards we're talking about, if you take Dame and Curry out of the equation, Donovan Mitchell is just by far the most efficient high volume scorer out of all of these. He doesn't have the same creation numbers as, in fact, I think out of this group of guards that I'm considering, he's one of the least heaviest assist players. Like he plays with a better passer in Darius Garland. Though Donovan Mitchell has played really well in the creator role when he's been called to in the games where Darius Garland isn't playing. He's displayed some good chemistry with the bigs, and also just like his defense came back this year. That defensive reputation he brought from college was clearly on display. Like I watched a lot of Cavs games and was very rarely disappointed with Donovan Mitchell, and I was as low as anyone, as haterific as anyone on his defense in Utah. So that was a pretty, one of the most dangerous sort of like slashing pull up guards in the league to just not be bad at defense anymore. That's huge. So yeah, I'd say he's my other guard lock as well, and is on my second team.
I think just to mention it, like a little bit earlier in Mitchell's career, he wasn't a terrible defender, right? I mean, he was defensive player of the year for his conference when he was at Louisville. So clearly he had the ability, and he has that crazy wingspan and, plus athleticism. I think it was just an effort thing in Utah, especially during the latter stages of his stint there. And there's another guard, actually, who I dropped from third team to honorable mention, who has had a bit of a defensive fall off just because of effort this year that we'll get to. But it's good to see that coming back with Mitchell.
Nice. Yeah, so I have Curry on my second team as well. I did not disqualify him. He was a tough one for the whole exercise, because my instinct was to disqualify him. He was out for a while, and he's gonna be right around. He's probably gonna finish around 2,000 minutes. So
yeah,
that's the criteria I came up with. So I'm sticking with it. But also, like, Steph Curry is so good that he's the only player on this list that he could play a dangerously low amount of games, and I could maybe talk myself into like, maybe in those 27 games Steph Curry played, he actually delivered like more impact and value than some players in this list. But I think he's borderline in the picture for me minutes wise, and then it's Steph Curry. And I mean, this is like one of Steph Curry's better years by the numbers. Oh yeah. Even though it was not it hasn't been a great year for his team. We'll see how they do in the playoffs. Obviously they can flip the narrative on that, but it was a gunky. It was not a fun year to be a Warriors fan, I don't think, or a Curry fan, but he played great, and yeah, he's on my second team.
I think that's more than fair, and if I was a real voter or something, and the rule set was that you can vote for Curry this year, and there was no games requirement, I would definitely have him on the second team. I'm just trying this new system out. Yeah. That's the one and only reason he's not here.
All right, let's get to this third team. So you had Mitchell, and you had
Drew Holiday.
Yeah, great.
On the second team. Yep. You don't have any comments about Drew Holiday?
No,
makes sense given the guys who aren't present.
My locks were Luka and Shea, and Curry and Lillard with that caveat, and Mitchell, and which left me with one spot. And I looked at all those players. I made this list of players, really specific, zeroed in on 6 or 7 other guards. And it was like, it was close, and it was a bloodbath. Like, from what I've, like, they're all great guards. I like a lot of them. A lot of them have really good seasons, but I mean, Drew was somewhat competitive with them offensively, and then we're just talking about an all defense first team level. One of the best point of attack defenders in the NBA, one of the best screen navigators in the NBA, and no one else on this list is even like in any kind of conversation defensively. Like, we can talk about who's bad and who's not with the rest of this list, but who's the second best defender out of all NBA, possibilities at guard. Like, I don't, it's a huge gap. It's like, there's not, like, it might be Shea. I don't know. Like, It might be Mitchell.
I would say Mikal Bridges if you're willing to go really deep there.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you
Depending
know?
on how many guys you have on your list in total.
Yeah, I didn't have him listed at guard, even though I know he was playing guard in like he played a lot of guard this year, and I know I'm not sure what he's eligible for in the NBA thing, but I had him in my forward pool. I had no problem with anyone sliding up to guard, but I don't think Mikal Bridges is beating at any of these guards, so I thought he was just more interesting in the forward pool, in the decimated forward pool that we'll get to soon.
So for my all NBA third team, going back to the guards, let's finish up the guards here. I mean, everyone who I have not on the teams, I was left with, some more sparse selections than maybe you'd expect. But the two guys that I went with are De'Aaron Fox and Darius Garland.
Those are your last two, De'Aaron Fox and Darius Garland. So
third team, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm such a Garland fan, so I love that. I couldn't get him on my team with the less strict injury restrictions I had, though I did have the two players that I would have put on the list. Well, I got another guy with injury concerns of his own, but my next two were probably going to be Darius Garland and James Harden. But James Harden's another would be disqualified. I mean, James Harden.
Yeah, not quite enough games.
Yeah, exactly. And then after that, I think it's really close. I Jalen Brunson, De'Aaron Fox, John Morant, and I looked a little bit at Anthony Edwards. If you like minutes, he's your minutes player, but the scoring efficiency just isn't there yet. I do think actually on this list, what we were asking about defensively again, I think Ant is a much better defender than almost all these players except for Drew, but.
Oh yeah.
So I gave him a look. I don't think he's a serious contender for that spot yet, but those are the players I considered, and I could be talked into a lot of ways in that. If I'm leaving Harden off for injury reasons, might go Ja. If I'm leaving Ja off for injury reasons, then I'd probably go Brunson. What do you feel about Brunson versus Smart?
Brunson
versus Fox. Sorry, everyone. I'm a little brain dead today. It's been a long day. I'm gonna mess up lots of names. And anyways, yeah, Brunson versus Fox.
So yeah, the argument for me, or the dispute for me, was more Brunson versus Garland. I gave Fox a little bit of a bump there just because of the team success, and I'm aware Sabonis analytically is more of the driver of their offense than Fox is, but I still give Fox a lot of credit for that. So Garland and Brunson, Jalen Brunson definitely shoulders a little bit more offensive responsibility than Garland, but I just think Darius Garland is the superior playmaker. And then also, if you really dive into
such a nice playmaker,
a lot of the defensive stuff, Garland's not like blowing your socks off or anything, but he's not a liability. And Jalen Brunson's defense has really slipped this year, so that is the main reason I ended up cutting him.
I'm into it. I'm not going to say anything bad about Darius Garland on this podcast. He's one of my favorite guards in the NBA. I think, and I've heard this argument made by Cavs media before, but it's an argument that tracks with me, because a lot of people were like, well, Garland and Mobley and Allen, like, they didn't get any better this year. Like, their stats are the same as last year. Like, why are you giving them more credit? It's like, well, because they added like a high volume, high usage offensive player to their team, and none of them dropped off at all. Like, they all maintaining and raising your maintaining your counting stats and keeping your efficiency or raising your efficiencies, like, that's a big deal. Like, that means, like, if there wasn't that massive score, those guys would all be capable of filling in a little bit in that role. So I think the improvement there from those young guys is a little bit hidden. But I mean, also, just watching Darius Garland is so fun to watch play. He had a bit of an up and down season, I feel, this year, but like one of the best, arguably the best, especially with Trey's poor year, just like combinations of passing and pull up shooting in the NBA. Like,
oh yeah.
And that's a fun combination to have. That's an offensive weapon built around. I can't wait for the Cavs in the playoffs. I hope that they put it together and pull off some upsets. And if not, I'll still be buying more stock next year, because the Cavs are a cool team, and Darius Garland is a cool part of that team.
Yeah, they have a lot of kind of all NBA, all defensive juice, because they have the three guys with the Garland and Mobley and Jared Allen who probably aren't making a lot of all NBA third teams or all defensive second team ballots, just with how stiff the competition is for those positions. But, they're all borderline, right? They're all at least in the conversation.
Yeah. So you want to run through your picks just one more time? So for those listening at home, they can keep track. You went...
Yep. So first team, SGA Doncic. Second team, Drew Holiday, Mitchell. Third team, Darius Garland, De'Aaron Fox.
Cool. And I went first team Luka and Shea, second team Steph and Mitchell, third team Lillard and Holiday. So, we're really it's just the injuries that kept us a little bit apart on that one, and how much we weighed that. Yep. All right, you want to move into the forwards?
Yeah, let's go forward and talk about those forwards.
Okay, the opposite of the guard pool. We're talking about we're talking a smaller number of guys and a smaller number of players with a certain amount of pedigree. Let's just talk about some of the players that I'm disqualifying, which means you are beyond disqualifying. You probably don't even want them mentioned in this podcast. They're so far away from your standards. But I'm leaving LeBron, Durant, Kawhi. All three of those players might be three of the best forwards in the NBA, but none of them were healthy enough to make my All-NBA team.
That's like three of the best 5 forwards, just gone this year.
Yeah. And to add to that, Paul George is right on the line, and I didn't have him making my team. A less starring name on the offensive side of the ball is Jaren Jackson Jr. Doesn't really come close to 2 minutes or games or however you want to cut it. He missed a lot of time early. He missed a lot of time with foul trouble, and he's not, I think, eligible by either of our standards. And then obviously Zion doesn't even come close. He was having a great season.
Exclusion this year.
Yeah, things were going great, but what did he play? 29 games? Not really happening. So that leaves us with only, by my count, there's really only 3 star names healthy enough to make this team, and they're all my locks. I don't know. Do you have 2 locks or more than that?
For all the All NBA teams combined? Oh, I had 4 locks.
4 locks. Who's that?
Is it with the guys that we're left with? Out of that pool, I had 4 locks left. Yeah. So first team, Tatum, Giannis. Pretty simple, pretty cut and dry. Didn't have to think about it.
Yeah. I will say there's nothing to detract or add to anyone's case. Tatum started off the year looking like an MVP candidate and finally added that missing piece to his game with the sort of rim driving and foul drawing and everything. But I think that dried up a little bit as the year went on, as Boston kind of slowly regressed to their being basically what they were last year. And, we both of us knew the hot shooting from everyone was going to dry up. But Tatum is, ever since he's entered the NBA, there's been 2 versions of Tatum, 2 kind of concepts of Tatum. When he came into the NBA, he was almost like this kind of wing. He was sort of like the big fundamental of small forwards. He came into the NBA kind of like that. He was just extremely solid at everything, really cool-headed decision maker, a really good 2-way player, just kind of ready to fill the gaps. And then he had that legendary off-season training moments with Kobe Bryant, and he came back in that second year just going full Kobe. I had a big playoff run in my rookie season. I'm just gonna jack shots. I'm a hero, and that kind of changed who he was and kind of changed his whole trajectory as a player. Still obviously a huge star either way, but kind of got away from some of those. And ever since then, it's been kind of managing of those 2 sort of personas. And he kind of he started off the year being a lot more fundamental and rugged. And then all of a sudden he was kind of going back to being I'll settle for a pull-up kind of no matter what. I will at any point in the game shift into pure hero ball pull-up artistry, and you know what, he's good enough that he can get away with it. But I think that's the biggest difference for me with Boston being an elite offense and Boston just being a good offense that might run into problems in the playoffs against good opponents.
I think there's too much taken away from Jason Tatum simply because of the overall talent on the roster. Yeah, I disagree with him not being an MVP candidate. I think, I don't know how to say this exactly, but it feels like a lot of people have kind of just written him off in favor of, the trio of Embiid and Jokic and Giannis. And I hear it brought up a lot, he just doesn't have the production. But honestly, his numbers aren't much worse. And especially when it comes to 2 out of that group of 3, I would say that Tatum is, provides more value as a 2-way player. And he's the best player on the second best team in the NBA this year. So record wise. So I don't quite agree with just writing Tatum off as an MVP candidate. I would say he's firmly in that mix. And I think the MVP, it shouldn't be a top 3. It should be a top 4.
Yeah. I've got a bit of a drop off after that top three. I just don't think. I think Tatum gets big points for the versatility compared to some of the other candidates we're talking about. I think Tatum's defense is underrated, even though everyone acknowledges he's a really good defender. I think he's a little bit better than a lot of fans picture him. I think some fans just kind of stop at that, like, yeah, we know he's good at defense. Okay, moving on. But it's like he's one of he should be an all defense candidate if he didn't play that forward position.
Yeah. Well, we can move on to Jimmy Butler because I had him on my second team along with Lauri Markkanen.
Lauri Markkanen was your pick. Okay, so this is where it gets. This is where it's just a mess. I'm fine with going Markkanen. Yeah. I could shuffle. How many players do I want to put in this shuffle? I'm going to say 1, 2. You know what? There's 3 players I'm considering for this other spot. I got kind of a 3-way tie that I don't mind. I think I'm going to go Jaylen Brown.
Oh, okay.
I'm not a huge Jaylen Brown fan. I know some people love Jaylen Brown because of the resiliency of his pull-up shooting game. Maybe they buy into some of the accoutrements. The on-ball defense can look really good sometimes. He's a strong physical player, but there's also these just like kind of big holes in his game. You know, just like, you know, he's just a very weak ball handler and playmaker.
Yeah.
And the kind of offense he gets while resilient is it's not very like additive. He's sort of like more of a bailout scorer than a thing you can build offense around, which is fine because he plays with other players and he's in a pretty perfect role for that sort of thing. But there's no denying that he kind of had a, you know, pretty monster year this year. Like Jaylen Brown averaged 26.7 points per game, 7 rebounds, you know, like a steal. He had a very efficient season by his own standards, sort of thing. But he is not as efficient of a scorer as Lauri Markkanen. Accurately, great. Like I only came across Lauri's nickname, the Finisher, recently. You know, obviously just based on his country, but it's also that is his game. Like he's a pure finisher, both in terms of his spot up shooting and his sort of like rim running, closeout attacking, like attacking the gaps. Like he's not a like creative player at all, but he's a extremely unique, multifaceted finisher. And that, I mean, like what there's a stat that he's the first player ever to get like 200 threes and 100 dunks in a season. Only player ever to do that. And maybe that seems like
I saw that the other day.
Yeah, seems like kind of a silly stat, but what that means, like, I mean, like we've all seen some Lauri Markkanen highlights, like some of these poster dunks this year. If you haven't hit up YouTube, it's a, you know, a fun way to spend a few minutes. But yeah, I mean, like his contributions are really unique. Now I'm going to compare him to the third player on this list, though, who's kind of a little bit of the opposite in that he doesn't carry that same elite scoring efficiency. He subsists off the toughest shots, but is like, you know, a million times the sort of playmaker, and that's Pascal Siakam. I can't quit him. He's still on my list. He's one of the 3 players I'm considering for the spot.
So Siakam would be on your third team here.
Yes. Yeah, I guess
your third team's Siakam and Markkanen.
Yeah.
Okay.
And really for that Jaylen Brown second team spot, I could cycle. Like move those players around all you want. I don't really have strong feelings there.
Third team for me was Julius Randle and Jaylen Brown.
Ugh. Randle, I can't get behind. I don't get it. Sell me on Julius Randle.
I mean, I don't love the fourth quarter decision making from Julius Randle either.
I don't love the first quarter decision making. I don't love the second quarter or the third quarter decision making with Julius Randle. I like the numbers. I get the numbers. He's definitely he is on my list of. He's the 4th player that I considered in terms of doing the statistical analysis. But sorry, keep going.
So yeah, no, Julius Randle to me, he's like the anti-eye test player because I feel like every time I watch the Knicks and watch Julius Randle play, I'm like, there's no way this guy is an all-NBA team. Should deserve to be on an all-NBA team. But I mean, I'm just trusting the production and the efficiency being okay with him.
Don't do it.
25 and 10. I mean, it's a regular season award here, right? And he's not necessarily like the main decision maker of the offense. So if I'm weighing a whole bunch of guys who are like the secondary players in an offense and Julius Randle has the best stats and the other guys, there's like a clear drop off statistically, that's where I kind of struggle knowing exactly what to do. But I will say some other guys I was considering.
Let me hate on Julius Randle a little bit more before we move on, and then you can bump down. So Julius Randle, just some because I think the case for him is that the Knicks were really good. And has the best sort of counting stats on the Knicks. Like you look at it, you're like 25 and 10 and 4 assists, like, and he shoots threes. Like, how can that not be an all NBA player? But like a couple of things. Knicks are better with Julius Randle not on the floor. They're a +4 net rating team. And this is like, we're talking about the guy who's supposed to be their best player. That's what there's less efficient scorers than him. Like Pascal Siakam, who we're about to maybe talk about more, is a less efficient scorer than Julius Randle. But for a high volume guy, he's basically a neutral efficiency scorer. So he's eating up a lot of Knicks possessions, but he's not doing anything special with them. He's just sort of like, he establishes this baseline. We're like, yeah, you're okay. You're like, a Julius Randle possession is okay. We already kind of know, or at least think, based off any available evidence we have, it's not okay in the playoffs. I never voted for DeMar DeRozan on any of these teams either, because it's just like, we all know that this game isn't real. Like, it's just a thing that you can use to like fill space. But like, we're like, and to me, Julius Randle is a space filler. I think he's one of the more talented players in the NBA. I think he's like, not like he's huge. Like, he's so strong. He moves really well. He's got skills as a shooter and a passer, but not enough skills as a passer and not enough skills as a shooter. Like, he's kind of a little bit underwhelming based on his talent level, based on those things. He can act as a bit of a battering ram, but like, I just think that this year, he's probably going to make All-NBA, and 2 years ago when he did, he's just getting by on a team that's really good for other reasons that he gets to be the face of. And I just don't see it with Julius Randle when I watch him, when I dig deeper into the numbers past the initial stuff. And I think that Julius Randle is like, I think he deserves consideration for all NBA, but like the smell test is very bad with Julius Randle. Sorry, Knicks fans.
Well, I mean, the only reason
I love Quentin Grimes. I love Quickly.
Yeah. It's just a year where all of the best forwards missed an absurd amount of time. Yeah. And the forward positions, when you get to the All-NBA third team, were pretty thin. I will say the other guys considered, if you allow me to fudge the numbers just a little bit, Jaren Jackson Jr., really close to 65 games. It sounds like it, if he plays these last three, he'll be at 63. So that's close. And then the other guys, DeMar DeRozan, who I'm sure you're not terribly excited to hear about. But then Mikal Bridges and Aaron Gordon. Mikal Bridges being that guard forward, kind of intermediary position. Yeah. Those were the other guys I was looking at.
DeMar's also like DeMar's a slightly different player now than he was when he was making all NBA teams, and I had a problem with that. Jaren Jackson Jr.
He's a better player than he was.
Yes, he's but yeah. Jaren Jackson Jr. He gets close in the games. The minutes, he does not come any, like, he's like kind of off the charts, nowhere near on the minute side of things. Like, he played under 17. He might finish at 1,700 minutes, which is like, so he's a hard disqualify for me, even if we're going to talk about defensive player of the year with him. But yes, but I don't really have a big problem with him being on the team. I mean, his offense, best offensive season ever, best defensive season ever, the Block Panther trip. But yeah, I think the crux here is Randle versus Siakam, because they're kind of similar players. And we went in opposite directions with them. I just see like, and Randle actually is a more efficient scorer than Pascal Siakam. I think he plays in a healthy offense. But
kind of where I was at with Siakam.
But Siakam just, he's like 3 times the like he averages a significantly higher number of assists and a significantly lower number of turnovers, while also being a plus defender rather than a negative one. And just sort of like, I just like the intangibles more, like, Pascal Siakam in transition. Pascal Siakam is sort of like an extra. I just feel like he fits on a winning team, where Julius Randle kind of forces you into this sort of like mediocre in between space where he's not really like, I just feel like Pascal Siakam clearly does things to help. I think he's in the wrong role, where Julius Randle's in the only role he can play. Pascal Siakam's masquerading as a Julius Randle, where really he should be kind of something else. But yeah, I just think it's a much more productive, impactful to winning basketball player. Advanced stats never loved Pascal Siakam because, again, he's not like a very efficient scorer. But yeah, when I watch the Raptors, I just see like a super dynamic player who does a whole bunch of things and is a little overtasked as a scorer. But anyways, that's just my reasoning for going Siakam on the over Randle. And Randle was not my next cut. I had two more forwards at least ahead of him.
And that may be, that may be my fault, trusting the eye test or trusting the numbers too much, disregarding the eye test. That's just what I do with Julius Randle, because it doesn't really look like he's an All NBA team player, but
Yeah.
the stats are there. So I
There's
just
this
kind of
one.
plugged my nose a little bit.
I also consider Evan Mobley. Evan Mobley and Aaron Gordon are the two guys I would have loved to put on the All NBA team this year with the power backing that was created, but I couldn't quite get there.
Yeah, I mean it's no fault of Evan Mobley's, but he's just kind of relegated to, the third or fourth option offensively. I mean, I
Yeah.
think the talent is there. Like it's gonna happen for him.
He's been sneaking
Probably in
up
the
though
not too
this last third of the
future.
season. Like he was kind of quiet all year, and a lot of people didn't notice that Evan Mobley just for the last post All-Star break has just been sneakily being the Evan Mobley. The leap that people wanted him to take at the beginning of the season has sort of been happening.
Yeah, averaging 16, 9, and 3 on pretty great efficiency. So, like numbers wise, he's better than Jaren Jackson Jr., or at least comparable to Jaren Jackson Jr.
And
And
I
yeah,
think
the efficiency is better, and the defensive impact probably isn't as big of a gap as you might think.
Let's do the bigs.
Okay, who you got first team? I'm assuming there's two picks here that you could go with. So I'm curious to hear who you went with.
Went with Bam Adebayo. No, I went with Nikola Jokic.
Okay, yeah, it was close. I kind of tossed it back and forth a little bit, but ultimately I went with Jokic as well.
Maybe we should save the
First
Jokic and Embiid chat, assuming you have Embiid's second team, even though he's maybe not going to qualify for your. No, he probably will. He'll probably get to 65 or 64 or something.
Yeah, no, I have him second team. I'm assuming he'll get there, or if not, he'll be like one game off. So
yeah. Who was your third team center?
Domantas Sabonis.
All right, we got the same things. Any close competitors for that third spot?
Yeah, it was actually close who you would expect for third team, but the guy who I had missing out for third team was actually Porzingis, because I think he's had a really nice bounce back season in Washington. I mean, the stats are awesome with Porzingis. The efficiency is awesome. From what I can tell, I haven't watched a whole lot of Wizards games, but the little I have watched and the analytics that are available, it seems like he's picked up the defense once again and has been an impactful player on that side of the floor, averaging 23 and 8. So
yeah.
He's been Washington's best player this year.
Question.
I'm sorry, Kuzma stands, but it has been Porzingis.
Yeah.
So, but I just think the team success and the fact that Sabonis is such an integral part of the playmaking on that roster of the best offense in the NBA, you gotta give it to him.
Yeah. I mean, Sabonis also like on that kind of capture the hearts and minds, the imaginations of the NBA fan base for the year. Like, I do need to see a Sacramento King on an All NBA team, and Sabonis is the player that's easiest to put on in that third center spot, and just like it was incredible to watch. He was dominant. He was punking people regularly, and the passing doesn't get talked about enough. Like, if Nikola Jokic didn't exist, would we be talking after this season about Domantas Sabonis being arguably like he would be in that arguably the best big man passer of all time all of a sudden? Like, he was already really solid in a season like this. Like, the number of just like he just palms the ball and looks so massive and just gets it wherever he wants. It's really fun to watch the Kings, and I don't think it's fun to watch the Kings at all if Sabonis is not there. So
Sabonis is basically averaging like the numbers Jokic did 3 years ago. So you kind of wonder if Sabonis has another level to get through. Is he going to become like the other center in the NBA who's a triple double threat every night and like, just this offensive hub? Like he's close. You just kind of wonder, like, is this the ceiling with him, or is there another step to get to? Because I think if there is another step to get to, the Kings might have, some real growth opportunity, even just with the talent they have on the roster.
Yeah. I don't quite see like the level of like, I mean, Jokic's passing is just, it's hard to describe. It's not something that I think linear growth leads to. Like, I think that's something that's just sort of, I mean, he just throws passes that no one has ever thought of. Like, there's only a couple passers like that I've seen in my lifetime, or even not just in my lifetime. I'm going back, like only Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Steve Nash are the only players I've seen like with that kind of consistent ability to just like throw passes that I wasn't able to see. Anyways, it was so I can't picture Sabonis scaling up quite to that level, but maybe the other parts of the game he's a little bit like sturdy.
Well, I don't know if
looking.
he'll ever reach the like, behind the back passing and, just the kind of the I just imagine Jokic has this like three-dimensional model of the exact situation on the court just playing out in his brain, a couple of steps ahead of everyone else. I don't know if Sabonis is ever going to quite get there, but I will say I didn't see him doing this. I didn't see this player happening when he was in Indiana.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
maybe we'll be surprised.
I was really optimistic about the Kings going into this season. Yeah, I wasn't saying I predicted he would average like 7 assists, though he's averaged 6.7 before, so that's really not actually that big of a stretch. Statistically, he's not doing things he hasn't done before, but like I thought that if they kind of put the ball in Sabonis' hands and orbited everything they were doing around him, that was going to lead to an offense. I didn't see the Kings being like the 2 seed or the 3 seed, but yeah. I mean, Sabonis was good in Indiana. I didn't have Porzingis quite on my list. I had Bam Adebayo and Brook Lopez were my other considerations of center.
Okay. I mean, the numbers that Porzingis is putting up are just kind of overwhelming. That's why I have him. Maybe in a vacuum, he's not quite as good as those two players, but he's definitely playing a larger role and really succeeding in it.
I think defensively with Porzingis, there's there's a lot that he brings to the table and some things he takes off compared to Bam and Lopez I have here for defense first, even if they're both having good offensive seasons in their own right. Obviously, it's not on Porzingis' level, but Bam and Lopez both being defensive player of the year level players, and Porzingis being someone who can help a defense, but also like Washington has struggled on that end a lot this season, in part because Porzingis can still be put in bad situations a lot. He's a player that can definitely help with rim protection, does have a lot of mobility in some situations, and then looks like a statue in others kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, Porzingis is a good. I had him and Jared Allen next, at least in terms of healthy players that were available. Obviously, shout out Anthony Davis, who's not I mean, it's an important cut to mention because Anthony Davis has been a monster this year. He should he should be if people aren't being as stringent with the injury thing, he's going to make some all NBA third team ballots for sure.
If he played 15 more games, then yeah, absolutely. He would be the all NBA third team center, even with as good of a season Sabonis has had.
Yeah, we'll see the Lakers in the playoffs, and we'll see what Anthony Davis has to say then, I guess. But I guess that sums up our all NBA teams. We did it. We got there.